sharing my screen. I'm going to go ahead and start us off here actually with our help guide. So if you are, hopefully you guys can see my screen. Hopefully you can hear me. If by now you can't, maybe we have an issue. But what I wanted to share here on this screen is that we have a guide online to help at least provide an outline that we'll also cover when it comes to this webinar of our Agile Kanban workflow. We are going to be talking about a little bit on templates and tasks and services, elements that we hope you are already familiar with. We won't be discussing, how to create a project or how to assign tasks to people or make those assignments. We'll be obviously referencing those during the course of the webinar. But we want to show you the task, the assignment management screen and how it relates back to your creatives and how your managers can use that tool. And then depending on time, we'll obviously dive into other screens or boards available to your workflow that relate to that. But we'll talk about obviously setting up things and going through the process of making sure you have the right settings on in order to start. If you were wondering how to get back to this, sometimes I've tried to do a share of the link within the tool here with Zoom. Sometimes it doesn't work. And so I have to try to make it work or at least share it. So I'll start, putting in a link here in the chat line of how to get to this part of it. Otherwise, if you're not able to, you'll be able to go to the top of the help guide and you can type in Kanban as an example, and we'll have it in a section under project management for workflows in Workamajig. That's one of the hits here. And it'll take you to a screen where you can then click on the link to talk about the setup and processes and back to pretty much where we were. So just an FYI on that. But now that we have that out of the way, let me go ahead and move over to my presentation here within the site. And what we're going to do is just start off by just letting you know that I'm using my sandbox. So I have some things preset. There's going to be obviously a difference between your view versus my view. How did you get there? Those kinds of things. I'll talk about the main stuff, but the little things, we want you to reach out to your account manager or to your team if they are in contact with their account manager here at Workamajig, so that we can help you set up something similar. Maybe you just don't have the access or the rights to do so. Right now, I am starting out in a screen that discusses or views my projects, my listing. So I will show you that in my menu screen, I'm actually inside the project manager icon. This is my menu, by the way. Your menu may look different. Obviously, my background screen will look dull, hopefully not or duller compared to what you guys have. Hopefully you've discovered the background tools here. But within the project manager icon or folder, I have other icons, and I'm just back at my project screen where I can see the projects that I want to talk about today that I'm going to be managing. And so we have at least here a presentation of two types of projects that I wanted to show you, having a monthly social, content project, and then a Agile website creation project. Just kind of showing you that within these projects, I have the ability to show you the schedules on each. And what I'm showing you here is I have these projects that are referencing templates. So there's that first thing, right, of how you can set up very simple schedules. And that's one of our goals with Workamajig, is to not overburden your account managers with trying to track every single task of, one of like 300 or 200 or even 100 rows within the schedule. Keeping it simple. This is going to be different than what maybe you've been through in training or maybe you're using, because these do not have any links. For example, if I were to toggle through and show you a Gantt chart of these tasks or milestones, they're kind of run concurrently during a period of time that I preset this project to run for. That is allowing these to just exist within the time frame where your project is going to run. There's no, dependencies. I'm still using assignments, so I'm still able to go into the edit screen and show you that I'm assigning myself pretty much to each of these tasks in order to make this presentation work, in order for me to travel through these tasks and show you, well, there's some graphic design work, there's the web programming, I'm talking to the client, and I'm developing content, right? So you'll use your own set of services, and hopefully you're tying those to your users, and that you're pre-assigning those in templates, or at least making it easier for yourselves to make those assignments exist within your tasks. Okay, so that's one example of it. The other one that I'll also have here in the back is going to be that social one. Now this one does have some dependencies, but the idea is that I have the ability to kind of cycle repeat tasks during a certain time frame. And they are grouped together by a sub task or a header task, excuse me, that I've labeled as the months, right? And again, the idea is the same, is that, you know, I've set out certain timeframes to exist within them, maybe not exactly within the month frame, but you can actually just adjust the dates so that they follow the timelines. And again, we won't get into so much of the discussion of the setup here, but the idea is that I've kind of set myself up so that, you know, if we're having a social media campaign that runs through various months, I can go ahead and pull these tasks, and from a template that maybe just has the breakdown or the basics for 1 month, and just being able to copy over the different tasks or the repeated tasks as follows, right, for the number of months that I'm going to be running it for. However you get this set up, the idea here, though, is that, again, not everything has a dependency. I'll still have tasks that run through the month that I still want to assign my team to, and that I'm able to then look at. So again, maybe I'm creating content or gathering content, or I'm doing some research, or I'm again talking to the client, or I'm actually posting that social media content out there, and I'm assigning that work to my users. Having those elements, the hours, the location, the services, obviously the tasks and the project, come to be very important in this Agile workflow, and in the Kanban screens that we'll talk about in a moment. So where I want to take you to now that we've seen the projects is taking you over to our main menu, over to the resource manager folder, main menu item here, and clicking on the assignment management. Now, at this point, I am showing you the screen. Now, I know and I expect that some of you may not have the access to that screen. And if you don't, I do want to talk about it. If you do, great. You'll have to ask your team for help, and or your team needs to reach out to Workamajig to help you set this up if you don't have the access for it, or maybe my video wasn't clear enough, or maybe it's not available yet to view once this is done. But I just want to give you the steps. If you're a super user, have access to talk to someone who's a new super user on your team, they'll need to go to the admin icon on the right side. We'll have to go over to the system setups selection here, and we'll have to make sure that in the security settings where the rights exist, they are turning on the assignment management screen. So as I type, it'll fill out some of the results, and that's the traffic grouping of rights, and it's going to be the traffic assignment management screen. So that needs to be turned on for anyone that needs to access that screen. So just be aware of that. So that's one thing, right? So let me go ahead and just exit out of here, and we'll go back to the assignment management screen here under the resource manager. And we're here. So what are we looking at? Well, we're looking at two people, not just me. I have Don over here on the left. But the idea is that this is a screen that's going to show you a week view. There's no way to dissect this any more detailed, like per day, or see it broader, like in a month or a couple months or a couple weeks. It's just an idea of a week view to show you what is out there for and what's assigned to these individuals, and what's available for work that's maybe not assigned yet. That's coming up on the left side here. Now, why these two? Well, because I'm using these filters that are on the screen here. You'll see that link here. And so I'm being very specific. This is my sandbox, so I have other users, and who knows what kind of mess I have them in. But this is a way that I can come in here and kind of clean up my view. Maybe I want to target a specific group of users, and I've add them by using the drop down and selecting the different people. Like I said, quite a bit of a mess here. Or if I'm organize my team to be in departments or offices, then I can choose those. I am using GL companies, which again, not something that I can cover today, so I could use that. But as I mentioned, also, we have your team tied to services or those assignments at least, right? Those placeholders. I can use those as well, right? Who, I want to see people that are linked to art, creative design, or, brand consulting or copywriting, et cetera, right? So I could choose those. So those are some examples of the filters. Yes, I didn't go through each single one of these, but the idea is the same, is to be able to filter out who you want to see on the screen, right? Now, obviously, I have more stuff than Don here that's available, but I want to also talk about the fact that this system is looking at, again, those assignments during that week, and it is including meetings. So if you are using the calendar feature in Workamajig and you are putting people's link to those calendar meetings or events, the system will pull those in here as well so that they count towards the grand value that you're seeing of the totals. Now, that being said, for Don specifically, since it's cleaner to see, I can see that on here, it's counting the total hours available. And I can also see that next to Don, there's a little green bar. As Don gets more assignments during that week, that bar will continue to grow, and it will also turn from green to yellow to red, as you can see in the comparison with mine on the right side. Okay. Now, the other thing you'll see under these profiles is that you can see the daily tasks that they have, the total count of hours. This is pretty simple. If it is highlighting it on the grid underneath, is because we're on that day. So today being Tuesday, that's what Don has today. That meeting is, if you notice, is on Thursday. So it is counting that meeting for Thursday, but obviously on the assignment list, it's not going to highlight it with blue, just so you know. So again, that's Don's. Mine's a little more rough. And, it'll highlight things as I go along, depending on which days I'm working on, right? Obviously, we're on Tuesday. Now, that being said, the next thing that we have on the screen here is we have these columns. Work to be done, did this today, halfway done and completed. Now, these statuses may look different than, but because that's what we call them, than what you have, these status columns. And that's okay. By default, you should have work to be done as your first one. But I'll show you how to edit them and what they mean and why they're there. They're arbitrary. You can name them however you want. You can even rename the default one differently. But the idea is that the system says, okay, if this is your first time using this, I got to find a place to hold all these assignments that are assigned to this person that you highlighted or that specific time frame in that column. So if I go over to the More button at the top of the screen, and this is again an area where you may or may not have all access to it. So that may be something that we have to then have you discuss with your super users or with your Workamajig account manager to talk about it if you don't have it. But we have the ability to edit assignment statuses. So this is that screen. And as you can see, the status grid matches the columns that I had behind the screen. Well, again, I can click on those to relabel them. I can set which one is the default. I can organize them. I can drag and drop them in a specific way so that they show up in a way that makes sense for me to see from left to right. And then we also have the default % complete. So a little background on that. When we start you off with Workamajig, or as your teams have started off with Workamajig, we let you know that we want to see your creatives give feedback on how much progress they're doing on their tasks and assignments by entering time. But we understand that some of your teams may have decided to not track time. You do lose out a lot on that ability. And so, but the alternative is to then set percentages. Hey, I'm a creative and I want to tell someone that in my assignment, even though I'm not entering time, I'm this much done. And so these columns, when you put your assignments underneath them, can be set to a % complete to give that kind of feedback. Okay. Otherwise, the system, we want to just let you know that you can still run your time entries, and we want you to. And so you may not need to set those to anything but 0, except for the one status that shows that the assignment is complete. Then by default, if you're using time entries and you're setting that task to be completed, it's going to turn 100% anyways. So just being aware that there's that feature here that you're welcome to try out or use. but it's mostly zeros and 100. I just do this for those users or teams that only use the percentage complete. If they want to give other feedback, this is how they can set it that way. Now, one other thing before we get into more of how this all works on the screen behind us, just note that as a super user, I have the ability to set different statuses for different groups. Maybe they have different ways that they're tracking their information. So I can set those security groups that are on my left to have different statuses. Otherwise, by default, it'll be the company defaults. If I wanted my account managers to have a different one, I would need to select that, highlight it, and create my own or not, and then go ahead and go back to my company defaults, right? So just an FYI on how all that works. And let me just make sure that we still have all our statuses on my end. Perfect, I still do. All right, so I think the only thing that I forgot to put back together was my the order that I had these in. So there we go. And then I can go ahead and refresh. There we go. All right, so the idea here is I'm the manager and I'm going to oversee Don and Manuel's work, right? Yes, I'm the same person, so it makes it easier for my presentation here. And I had a mixture of old and, sort of, random tasks that are appearing unassigned on the left side, but I also have tasks that have been assigned to Manuel. And I want to make sure that things get done in a priority. So that could be another way that you can label these. And as you've seen, you have some of those. So if I want to go ahead and as I run through these lists, I'd actually want to start off with this one. I can go ahead and drag and drop the card and communicate in a way that I want this task or assignment to be done today, right? Because again, we're looking at it from a week view. And this task technically has a future date that's even further out. And so the idea here is not that we're trying to complete the task, is that I want things to be done for this task that maybe, we'll still have to go back and forth between other statuses, right? Before we get to be completed. Now, just by moving this over, I'm already able to communicate that this task has some priority over the others. Well, how does that help the creative see it? Well, now we have to move over to the creative side. At this time, it looks like I may have a question. And it says, Giovanni says, when logging time to a task, does the percentage completed change according to the time entries? Pain point we have is that the time is logged, but the team is not setting the percentage complete. So the time is technically independent of the percentage complete. However, for the task, however, how it does affect is the project percentage complete, because what it's doing is weighing the time entries versus the time that it's spanning for the task to be completed, as I remember it correctly. If I'm saying it wrong, I do apologize, but that sounds like something that I would have you talk to your account manager on. Just because what we're doing is if we're tracking time, it's really, is it done or not done, right? And are we weighing the hours based on the allocations? That's really how I would definitely see it. But if you're wanting to get the creatives to put time in and also tell you, well, I got 10 hours, but I'm only 2 hours, but I'm almost done, then that would be for your team to then, use those communication tools to help you. And maybe the Kanban style here that I'm showing you at least helps you know, okay, when they enter time, maybe the columns can help you know the percentage complete that they're on because they put them in those statuses if that's how you want to use it. Again, my goal here and our goal here with the webinar is to introduce to you this tool. But I would definitely have everybody follow up with their account managers to just confirm that they are using it to the fullest and also that it matches the process or workflow that you have. But yes, good question on that. Okay. All right, so how we're gonna go ahead and do that is that I'm gonna go ahead and compare this back to my creative page. So again, the goal is that your today creative page needs to have this screen in order for the creatives to see it. Now, most of the time, when you start off with not using this tool, you'll have your today creatives page use this tool, the card view, maybe the grid view, right? That's not what we have. Again, this is just my tasks as crazy as they are. But to turn this on for this third option, which is the tile view, as we call it, again, you'll need access to the more button. You'll need access to the system settings. And for the options here, we're going to scroll down to where it shows the tile view. Okay, so that needs to be on. And then that will allow you to see this icon all the way on the right at the top 3, and will allow your users to see it, right? And so that they can see the same grid that you had in the assignment management screen, but here. And look, I came into work today and I see that my manager has assigned me something to work on as a priority over everything else, right? So that's great. So I can go ahead and work it. Again, we're not going to spend the time on too much on what the creative possibilities are within this card view or this tile view, but we are getting a lot of information already from what's been assigned from the setup of the task and assignment and project, right? So my goal is to just complete it. Now, as I'm doing this, I may say, well, I am halfway done, right? Maybe time has gone by and I'm going to go ahead and move this over to halfway done. So you'll notice that I have the 50% marked right there, right? And obviously, yes, we're entering time. That's something that's very easy to do with that time entry icon here, right? It's just I have 5 hours allocated, so that's available to me, right? I can do a new time entry and I can go ahead and say, well, maybe it is, 1.5 hours, and I'm actually faster than what the allocation was, right? So I can go ahead and enter that in here, right? So we'll have it save the time entry. As I'm going through this though, right, I'm setting this information in here, and I'm wanting to maybe see if I can force some refreshes to update some of the screens available here. But the idea is that I'm working in it for this week perspective. This task definitely runs a lot longer than this week. So there's some computation there that I did not, I don't have the math here to tell you why these numbers are those numbers and how it's remaining. But the idea is that the system is taking what's allocated, dividing it up into weeks and putting it here for you. And then it's going to, once the daily process that we have available catch up, then it'll say, okay, yes, we worked so many hours this week, right? So that's the idea. Now, I can go ahead and mark this over to my side, and then from the manager's perspective, I can go back to the resource manager tool, go to the assignment management side, again, looking at what's going on Manuel's side, and I can see that that's available. Now, as a manager, I can say, great, you're halfway done. I can see that information. And within this tool, we also have another way to communicate, which is comments. So I can go ahead and say, great job. See if you can get the other half done today, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So I've left those comments, they're right here. And when I go back as a creative, again, to my today's creative page, I'll see those notes. So it is, yes, a one directional message, but I'm getting that feedback from my manager, right? For me to see, it is just a field. It is just a comment. It doesn't track history of what the manager said. It's just a small field for you, for the managers to provide information as to what they're saying on the task, right? So that's what's available. And the idea then is obviously that I want to have this completed. So I'm a good creative. I go ahead and finish it. And now it turns my task 100%. And obviously I can see from the other side, again, that moved and that they're done with that assignment. Yeah, pretty straightforward. And there you go. All right. So you can continue to do that. You can continue to drag things over as the manager. You can continue to see that filters. If you're saying that in my case, I'm overworked, well, other tools that I have available is that I can go ahead and reassign these to others. So again, I want to stay with the same project. So maybe I want to assign the graphic design over to Don. So as you can see, as I hover over Don's record gets highlighted over that. And then I'll be able to make the assignments. Now, this is where we start to see some things that are tied to those tasks. Well, this one technically has an open to do. So we're going to talk about to dos in a moment. But one of the things that we're seeing here is the ability to, when you're moving tasks from one user, or at least reassigning them to another user, the system's going to say, okay, there are open to dos in the task. And what am I doing here? Am I just handing this off to Don? Or am I going to just do all remaining hours? Or am I going to set numbers of hours from the split? So in originality, this task had 40 hours. So maybe I'm just wanting to share some of those hours with Don and not all the hours to Don. And then I can go ahead and save that, right? And obviously now we see the effects on both the numbers. This one's went up, these ones went down. Okay. All right, looks like I have another. And is asking, does the system allow partitioning? That is, we have creatives divided into teams, each with a different leader. Would each leader be able to see only their team? So yes, the answer is that they are able to see everyone. However, that's why we then have you use the filters, right? So if you have your groups of people, set up in their departments in the back end of the system and their employee profiles, right? Offices, that's another way to filter for them. Or they all have this talent or labor category, another way of calling it a service, right? They would be there. Or maybe you've grouped your groups of people into teams. If you use those, then you can use these filters. So just so you see those people. And if you're not using any of those, but you know who your people are, you can go ahead and again, go into the user list and assign or filter just those individuals so that you only see them here. But yes, that is the goal, is that you use those filters to divide up those partitionings that Anne just asked. So good question on that. Okay. So yeah, so now I have all that information there. Let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to cover on this area. Now, as I mentioned before, this screen is for the week. So you can move forward into future weeks. If there's any assignments that are not part of that week, but aren't done yet, that are assigned to someone, then you'll see that a new column appears called due before this week, just so that you can make that assignment work, like, hey, we need this done as soon as possible, right, in those future weeks. So that's a tool that you have. Let's see, what else was I going to say? Oh, and then as you're going through these columns, let me go back to my home column here for this week. Just know that the system is going to be tracking what you count or have once the refresh happens. It is adding up the hours for the week in these totals. So it's just a matter, there we go. Now I push the refresh, right? This one has 3.5 hours, 3.48, right? It's just doing some rounding there for the week to total as you see them. So that way they have an idea of, okay, am I overloading the user or not in comparison to what they have available for that week for those statuses. Let's see what else I wanted to cover before we get to more questions. On the left side, so like I said, if you see that there says unassigned work, our system can allow you to see them by different ways. So on the pencil icon, you can filter out what's on that left side. Show me tasks with open to-dos, show me tasks that are ready to be worked on, which means that they have a completed predecessor, or by, again, the filters that we saw earlier. This one does show project status, to-do statuses there. We'll get into to-do statuses in a moment. But that's the idea with that screen, is to see that. Now, I can go ahead and collapse the information so it does show it by project, or I can go ahead and hide it all together so that I don't see that and I have more screen space so that I can see my statuses and I have to scroll. So those are all available. And then I believe if I go up to the more button and I go into the system settings here, this is where I can do some cool things on the screen on the display. I talked about the green and the red and the yellow. Well, that's going to allow me to, and these red marks here as well. If I have anything over a certain range, then I'll see that. I have probably broken this a little bit because we're playing with it, but the idea is that I'm counting how many hours needs to be max in order to turn it red or have it turn yellow. If I go over 5 hours and I'm at yellow, or how many hours are left from the max daily hours before it turns red. So that's the bar there for me to use. Now, if I have too many people on the screen, I can go ahead and use shorthand user tiles. You'll see that in a moment. If you're not counting hours again, you can have the totals of these statuses total up to the number of tasks. And then again, I can limit the view of what tasks are showing if I only want to focus on the ones that are ready to work on. If my project schedule is showing, sort of like a waterfall view on some of those tasks. So that's what I have here. And then for the unassigned tasks, I want to show them on the left. do I want to show 0 allocated tasks? And then how do I want to group my unassigned tasks? Right now I have it by project, but I can choose other different grouping options instead, whatever works to help you. Okay, so that's what I have. I'll leave the shorthand on so you can see how that affects it. See, now I see it from this view, very shorthanded, but that fits more people on the screen. So I don't have that problem, so I'll go back and redo that. All right, let's see, I have a question. Where did I go off to hand off hours again? Yes, let me go ahead and repeat that here. So again, I see that I'm overworked and I want to send some of this over to Don. So I would go ahead and let me choose this one and move this over to Don's block or profile as I hover over it. And then that's going to provide that handoff feature. And then I can do all remaining hours. So I can split the hours and then I can send Don an email if Don is not already looking at that screen from the Today Creatives. That's the point, is the Today Creatives should always run that screen behind their work, right, on the second screen, right, because they're going to see these actions update as the manager updates them. So that's how it does. That's how it works. Reassign it and takes it off my list. And now Don has more hours there and I have less over. So it's getting better for me. So good questions, good questions. All right, let's see here what else I wanted to discuss on the screen. So yeah, when we get back to the Today Creative page, one thing that I wanted to point out as a super user, if you want to control the ability for your users to drag their tasks, because maybe you don't want to have that two-way communication, you can disable dragging tiles for them. So that's going to be another option there for you that I wanted to mention. And then someone had asked before, I think maybe it was Giovanni, about setting percentages. So this allows your users to set percentages. That's going to be up to you and maybe a discussion with your account manager if you want that on or off. But that's just a note that relates to our topic here among all the other options that I won't get to discuss, but I wanted to mention. Okay, so there's that. So yes, we did talk about statuses already, going back to what's available here. So I'm just checking that off my list. And then one of the things that I wanted to show you is that, again, if you're filtering under the resource manager tool and you are seeing that and this is going to be an extreme example, so I'm going to move a few weeks forward. But as I move into March here, and I'll go one more week, see if I have those. I'm going to start to, maybe I gave them away here. Let's do one more week. Oh, I guess I did not set that up. Oh, me. There we go. You'll see this other icon that I wanted to show you. So it'll tell you as a manager, if for some reason you are not filtering out tasks, for predecessors that are not complete, it'll mark the card or tile to have that little red calendar view, so you know that. So that way you're not getting ahead of yourself. But again, our goal here is for you to use the more button and to do the system settings if you want to only see those tasks that are ready to be worked on, right? So I would check that on and I would save it, and then that would update it. And now I'm just looking at what needs to be worked on, right? Obviously, it's an extreme example because I have a lot of this set up to be worked on today. All right, let's see if there's anything else, any other nuggets here that I wanted to show you. No, it looks like we're good with that list. Okay, so the other half of this is now coming into those to-dos. So the idea with this, if I go back to my week, the 15th, right? And you'll see I left myself with at least one thing here, or this is still done. I have to change it to me. But I have these tasks that have open to-dos. So a to-do would be another way to communicate with your users, or for them to also communicate back to, no, okay, you have a very simple, and again, this is where I would go into the dashboard, or excuse me, the schedule of the project to remind you that's a very simple structure, right? Maybe we're in the month of February/March. This is what needs to be done. Yes, I'm assigned to everything here. but it makes the managers, the traffic manager or the project manager's life easier to know, okay, things are being worked on, right? They're very fluid. They're not waterfalls or mostly waterfall. And I know that things are being done and I need to communicate to them what needs to be done. So within the tools here, I can go ahead and choose to look at adding to-dos, right? In this case, maybe I've asked this user to consider video links, right? That's my to-do. That's what I maybe add some comments to it. And now this is what shows up as a to-do in the system. It's linked to a task and the project. It does not track time to itself. It can track time to the task, but not to the to-do. Just an FYI if you see those. But this is a tool that starts to now morph into a way to communicate between users in a group. In this case, the person assigned to it, and then whoever's maybe overseeing the project can see notes that are being added, right? Or I'm communicating as a manager, like this is from the manager, right? And there's whatever instructions or ideas or collaboration is being done, right? And from the perspective of the user, again, and this is maybe coming from the opposite side, and I should make a note of which one I'm in. That was the project 17, and that was gather content. So if I go back to my Today Creative page, and I go look for 17, gather content, I'll see that I have my open to do, right? Clicking on the card view, I can see what's there on the to do. Hey, initially it was maybe some links to add to the content. I can click on it. I can see the history of communications or collaboration between myself and maybe those other users or managers that are involved. I can say, okay, thanks, right? And assume that there's more than one person communicating here. And then I can continue to see those threads coming from the to-do. So that's one basic way of using to-dos in a very agile style workflow. So you can track those so that, again, from a manager perspective, I don't have to be within the project. I can go back to the resource sync tool, make sure I pick the right person, make sure I see the right card or task or tile view of it. I can see the to-do right away. Oh, I must have not clicked on it, but within the tools here, I can see the listing of communication that's available for me to see. Okay, so that's one thing with to-dos. Let's see, I got a question that just came up. Can to-dos be saved into project templates and transferred over? Yes, you can definitely set up to-dos at that level. Now remember that because a template is a template, right? Most of the time, you may not know who your user is. Now, if your templates are designed with services, allocated hours, right, all that good stuff, and you're putting in a user, you can at the template level say, well, Manuel is always going to have work in this template, and it's always going to be assigned that work. So I can go ahead and even go far enough to assign that to do to Manuel. But that's not usually the case. So just know that to-dos are something that multiple users can be linked to because they're linked to that assignment, to that task. And what they're going to do is they're going to see it from, and again, going back to my Creatives Today page and finding my guy here, is that, maybe me and Don are working on this together. And until this becomes assigned to someone, maybe I'm going to grab it for myself. So maybe in the details, I'm going to put it under my name, right? I'm the only one assigned, so my name is the only one that shows up, right? And I can save it and I can do that. And now it's mine. And then Don will see that if we look at the card view of that information, it is linked to me as assigned. And then either a manager or whoever's grabbing that can now change even statuses of to-dos. And that's something that we'll touch lightly on. It's not really the intent for this session. But if I want to update it to a status, okay, now it's being worked on, maybe it's in progress, right? Then I'm using those tools to communicate where those to-dos are set. Now that we're moving into that to-do portion of how those things work, I want to then introduce you to a couple of setups before we get to see it. Under the main menu, we go over to the admin side, we go over to the system setup, and we go over to transaction preferences, different than from the rights. And again, you may need your help from your super user to get this far. But under the project section, if you go through all this list of other options, we have an option to use to-dos. So that is something that needs to be on for you to use to-dos to see them if you didn't see them when you were following along with me or later on. If you want to get fancy with your to-dos, you can set up statuses or types. Obviously, I'm using both, and I've showed you how I'm using statuses there. If you're using either of those tables, you'll see that you'll have access to those in the global lists. To-do statuses are going to be here at the very bottom. This is a very simple grid. You've seen me use a different grid before with the assignment statuses within the traffic management screen, but these ones have a similar flow. There's no percentage complete because, again, to-dos are, did you complete it or did you not complete it? Do you have a default? There's your default for when you start off, and then it's a default, mark to be completed when it is shown as completed. So it'll have a similar sense. To-do types, I believe, are under contact management. And actually, I think we call them conversation types. Again, this is just another layer to track. I'm just showing you this, but I would have you talk to your account manager to discuss that a little bit more, just because again, the intent, the purpose of this module is more just to focus on the simpler levels of to-dos. But what I do want to show you is that once you have all that on, you can go over to the project manager icon here, and you can track your to-dos from a to-do board. In this to-do board, I've already filtered out my 2 projects, right? And here are all the to-dos, and I can see the difference between maybe those that are assigned to me, right? And it's most of them, versus Don. I don't know if I actually did put Don in one of these or not. Oh, yes, I did. So that I can track it as a manager, and the same thing as a Kanban style of tracking, but now the to-dos, okay, I see this to-do exists within this project, and obviously by clicking on it, I can interact with it. I do get a little bit more detail out of it, but in this case, I am tracking its progress from statuses. So I can see, okay, yes, it's in progress, Don's working on it, or from the way that I saw with me, I already saw that because Manuel interacted with it, he's grabbed a few and he's put them in progress. And obviously, as they go through your workflow of your arbitrary to-do statuses, right, you'll be able to see them progress to be completed. So that's the purpose here, is to, again, show you that we have a assignment Kanban view, keeping those tasks simple, keeping those assignments simple, right? And then if you need that additional layer, but still keeping your schedule simple, then relying on to-dos to make that connection, to send those messages, to collaborate that way, and to see that progress. Usually when we see it, it's more regarding the website, hey, I want to see the progress of how you're doing with adding artwork, or maybe it has to do with fixing a bug within the site, right? Maybe you're talking to your client or you're doing some internal testing and you're taking it through its paces and you're like, well, right now it's in review, right? And you get to track that, right, from the to-do board, but you also get to see that from the resource manager assignment view, but in regards to the assignments, right? So again, what am I linked to? What's the what's the task that has the to-dos? Is it the gather content? I don't think it's that one. I think it was the troubleshooting. Maybe it was that, right? And being able to see, I don't know why it keeps opening to just that. Maybe I can't, yeah, it's like it's not recognizing my click. But anyways, being able to see that it's in review from this way as well, right? Seeing my list of to-dos so that I know, and obviously I could add more to-dos, right? But the option here is just more of keeping track of what's available for my users. All right, so I have a couple of questions. I just wanted to kind of finish my train of thought there. All right, so Kate asked first, can you add to do from the resource manager scheduling page or only on the project schedule? I believe you can. Let's take a look here. So let me address your question. So if I'm from the card view, yeah, should be able to. I'm not sure why I'm not seeing that. Show to this for this project. Maybe it's because I'm hiding it. Oh yeah, I did a couple extra ones. Looks like, maybe not from the screen. Let me see if there's another way that I can add it to do. Oh, at the top, perfect. So yes, so you can add it to do from here. You just need to select the project and task, obviously fill in the information. And then if you want to set statuses or assign to, you can. Like I said, types is an extra layer that's available there for you. You can attach things to your to-dos. So, but yes, there we go. It's a good question on that. All right, and then Giovanni, so not deliverables today. We do have a separate webinar that talks about deliverables that we invite you to either review. We'll have our, just to answer your question fully, we'll have our webinars listed in our guide. So if I scan back over here to our help guide and I'll just go to the homepage, support.workamajig.com, you'll see a listing of webinars. This one will eventually be here. Training webinars is here. It'll give you a list of what's upcoming, the ones that are posted. I don't know if this year we've done the deliverables one. I want to say that we did at the beginning. Nope, it was probably at the end of last year. So let me go ahead and click on 2021. And there it is, deliverables right there at the bottom. So, and I think that we have an upcoming one for advanced deliverables later on in the year, next month or two. So just an FYI on that, but good questions here. But yeah, so the idea again is that we know that Workamajig has that process of scaling your tasks in a way that they're waterfall, right, or sequential. But we understand that there's going to be processes or methodologies, especially with some examples that I showed you with websites or social media campaigns, where you may need to not have dependencies like that between tasks. And another way then you will be able to track that is having this assignment screen available to then track this by the statuses, because you can move back, right? And say, okay, yes, it's marked some information. That's great. I'm going to go ahead and move it back because maybe the status says, fix bug in review. Maybe it wasn't fixed and I got to put it to fix bug, right? Or maybe it has to do with, review post, then redo the post, right? Those could be statuses, and then yes, ready to post. That could be the other way that you set up these statuses. So that's going to be some options that you have available. And then obviously the ability to communicate that back to your team over to the Creatives Today page. One last thing here, I know I have more questions that I wanted to tell you, is that once your team decides that that view is what you want to see for the most of the work and process, you may decide that you don't want to have your users rely on these because these don't have those statuses, right? There's no way to communicate. Yes, you can still use to-dos for those. You can still, as a user, I'm gonna filter from everything else that I have messed here, and I can see, well, it tells me I have open to-dos, and maybe that's how I want to communicate. So I open up my task and I can see that list and I can collaborate, or I can update the status from my to-do from that point of view, or complete it. And that's great, right? But if you decide to finally just use the assignment view for your users, again, under the More button, under System Settings, you'll just go ahead and in the settings here, remove the card and grid view and save it. And whenever, by the way, you see this option, because your users have at least access to the display options to kind of filter for completed tasks or completed predecessors or open to-dos, you may not want to change their settings. So I usually click on the green. The red one is if you're trying to clean up people's act and say, hey, we recommend that you have these boxes on or off, and I've set them up in the system settings, and so your display options will reset. Then you may get some angry users out of that. But this one will keep their display options as is, but you're still allowing the system settings to be overridden. And now they have no option but to use the assignment statuses screen from their view. So just another idea to share with you as you're thinking of rolling this out. All right, let's see some questions. The link to Kate, I'm not sure I know which link. Oh, to the support document. Yes, I did put it on there. Like I said, it didn't, I think when I do that, it doesn't go. So what I just try to show is that if you're in the Workamajig side and you type in Kanban, I think it ends up being the option that, or the result that says project management workflows and Workamajig, and that will take you through it, the comparison between a waterfall and an agile style. And then these are shortcuts to get to that. So I did put that on the chat, but I think the link just kind of dies in there a little bit because of how complex it is on the screen. But hopefully that helps. And then Judy, how long until this webinar is posted? We try to kind of work with Zoom to get them up and running and then posting on the site. I want to say within a couple of days. We usually do send that an email letting you know that it's available or that it comes with the link. I don't know exactly on that one. But what I would do, Judy, and for everyone else, is that just give it a day or two, and then I would have you reach out to support@workamajig.com because your account manager can usually find those for you. But yes, I do see them taking just a little bit to get posted onto, again, our main menu of our website here, support site, webinars, and then training webinars. And obviously you got to click on 2022 to see them. So, I mean, this one is already from last week, so definitely less than a week, looks like, for sure. So hopefully that answers that question. All right. But yeah, that's again our purpose for this call is to show you that those comparison or those tools there. If you want to follow up with your account manager on this, please do so. They can get into more of the conversation of what's possible with your setup, maybe recommend some other tools or uses for it, discuss the statuses, both for to-dos and for the assignments, and maybe just help in general with some other questions. I do see another one here. Oh, thanks, Kate. Appreciate you guys too for joining. And yeah, I'll maybe wait a minute or two more, see if anyone else had any questions, but we hope that makes it easier for you and your team to track things and to make it easier to traffic your assignments and your schedules and your tasks. But enjoy the rest of your day and look out for other webinars as they come up.